ranking the scene.
Yo, what the fuck is up? Warped Tour, the state of the scene at SOTS Podcast on all social media. Sam here with Marcos.
What's good?
So, this is Ranking the Scene, where every single week we bring 3 brand new albums to the ever-growing tier list to rank them against everything that's come before and everything that'll come after to figure out what the best album in the whole scene is and coincidentally the worst.
Pretty fucking simple.
This week, as they are every week, Marcos, our albums recommended by patrons over at patreon.com/SOTS Podcast. If you want to recommend us an album, you can join. Link in the description of this episode. Only $3 a month. What do we got this week, Marcos?
We got the debut record, self-titled, from Advice and Men.
Indeed we do.
Skinny Dipping by Stan Atlantic.
Uh-huh.
And Better Off by the Home Team.
All debut albums, as a matter of fact, Marcos, all suggested once again by our patrons. Now, you can watch every episode of the show to date if you don't want to be spoiled on the current tier list ranking, but it's not super important if you just want to jump in. I'm going to scroll up and show you that right now, but once again, if you do want to watch those episodes, there's a playlist over on our YouTube channel, and you can see them all from the very start. Here it is in all its glory, Marcos. Your tiers from the very top: GOAT, followed by Masterpiece, Certified Hood Classic, That Bitch, Just Okay, Pretty Mid, Fucking Awful, and Crime to Humanity. At the very top, you can see, is Sempiternal by Bring Me the Horizon, the best album we've listened to so far, period. Followed closely by Disposed by the Plot and You, and Dying Is Your Latest Fashion by Escape the Fate. And at the very bottom, unfortunately, all by its lonesome, Father of All by Green Day. The worst album we've ever heard in our whole lives.
Father of all motherfuckers.
Drink it in a little bit. Take a look around.
Big thing I'm seeing here, again, is we've graduated to 2 columns and Just Okay.
We've listened to a lot of albums that are just okay.
There's
I don't know
a
if
lot
that's
of
fortunate or unfortunate.
Respectfully mid out there.
Yeah, not like bad mid, but like mid-mid.
Yeah. Very good mid as opposed to pretty mid.
Yeah, that's precisely correct, Marcos.
Just okay.
We actually have a category where the mid is called out. Let's get right into it. Of Mice and Men and their debut self-titled album, Marcos. This is the California metalcore band's first release. It dropped on March 9th of 2010. It was not March 9th of 2010. It was March 15th of 2010. Do you see how Genius has two
Genius
different
have
data
two?
points here? We got March 9th at the top. We got March 15th down below. That explains why this album bio was unreviewed. Nobody
technically
did the minimum legwork here to make sure this was correct.
It's got 3 release dates technically because it was leaked on February 10th.
Guy who's trying to figure out exactly when the Advice and Men album came out. It's a whole show, 10 episodes, HBO. A lot has happened since then, Marcos.
A little bit has happened.
A
lot of information has come to light since then.
So there have been allegations against both of the frontmen on this album. They're no longer with the band.
Haven't been for a minute.
Current vocalist Aaron Pauley is not with the band at this current time. So this is a version of Mice and Men that doesn't entirely exist anymore, though there are pieces, right? There's still aspects of this band that are still around.
And some of that context aside, this is a record that I have for a long time held very near and dear to my heart.
This is core to your being in terms of like where you started as a scene kid, right?
Yeah.
Like this was a entry point.
I think of like high school for the most part. I think of this record.
I gotta know then. Obviously you've heard it. How did it age?
It aged pretty fucking well.
Okay,
Again, dismissing. Dismissing is not the word.
Acknowledging, I think, is what you were trying to say. Yes.
While not fully including that in my feelings about this record, it's aged pretty well.
Sure. Aspects of these people aside, the album is aged fairly well. I understand what you're trying to get across, Marcos. It sounds like quintessential Risecore from the age that it came out. Now,
it's a cut above regular Risecore.
Okay. I mean, it starts very, very strong.
This was the album that for 2 years, a lot of other bands would try to replicate
Sure.
the
Yeah.
sound
No, that
on
makes
it.
sense.
Yeah.
Opens
On
incredibly
rise, off rise, whatever you want to call it.
strong. YDG is a heater right up top. No doubt about it. And they don't call it the South for nothing. Keeps the trend going until finally we get to Second and Sebring. And then this is the song that essentially made this band for a little while.
And you got to acknowledge the South on this, because the guitars on this record, you do not hear, outside of maybe that next album, today, like in Of Mice and Men. Like
They
this
don't
was
shred
like
like
a
they used to shred.
lightning in a bottle, like Southern shredding like this does not take place on future Of Mice and Men albums.
I understand what you're trying to say.
And I certainly did appreciate it at the time, and I appreciate it today as well.
What about this track listing really stands out for you?
The names.
Okay, so we're not even talking songs. We're just talking names at this point.
Names were so fun back in the day, bro. The Ballad of Tommy Clayton and the Raw Dog Million. Bro, Raw Dog's, that's taken a new life
right, like
lately.
I said, it didn't mean what you thought it meant back then.
Well,
7,000 miles for what?
YDG? Still YDG in?
I mean, we're not
Do you
quite
remember
there
what
yet.
YDG was? That just You Dig?
I think it is You Dig.
Was it?
I don't
Yeah.
remember entirely.
7,000 miles for what? Actually, the one thing that stands out about this record is it sort of like kind of peters out in a real weird way.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. You said this aged incredibly well. I don't necessarily agree with you. I still think that Shaylee Bogart has one of the most unique voices this scene has ever had. Just like the cadence of his voice and like his style of singing was truly never replicated by anyone.
Vocal
period.
dynamic at that time was fucking unmatched, by the way.
He
Two
was
people in their prime, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. Wasted talents, absolutely,
Yeah.
for sure. But like right here in this like pinnacle of like the scene, it was arguably one of the best pairings there was around.
And again, like I was sort of getting at earlier, it kind of just ends on, I would say, two of its more forgettable tracks in a real disappointing way. It doesn't like end on a real strong banger that really sends you out as you would hope to be sent out on what is an otherwise great album.
I'm going to say overall, I thought this album had more classics in my memory than it truly does. I thought there
disagree.
were a few songs on here that were hits, but for me, I think this band really kind of happens, as far as I'm concerned, on the next album.
Yes and no. Because I don't know. I still think this is my favorite.
I think this has a lot of nostalgia value for you, and I don't know that it quite holds up in the same way for me. You were much hotter on Of Mice and Men early on than I was.
You know what I forget? Is that they kicked Austin Carlisle out of this band?
Yeah, that did happen.
Like around the time this debut released, if I'm not mistaken. And then he would then return in time for the second record, replacing Jerry Roush, who was in Glass Cloud, would be in, or was in Sky It's Airplane, would be in Glass Cloud.
Yeah, there it is.
Whew. And I guess the reason the second one has like a different energy to it is I remember that it featured a lot of material that Austin wrote with the guy from Views from an Airplane.
That's fascinating. Views from an Airplane is a band that I feel like absolutely does not have any like a real solid
nothing.
history in this scene. Never took off in really any capacity.
That is honestly
familiar with.
the biggest notoriety that name ever had, was that it was briefly connected to Austin
I think
Carlisle,
that might be fair to say. Yes, I agree.
which isn't great nowadays, but
Austin,
at the
who would
time
later
was
leave
neat.
this band again, for what it's worth.
Yeah. Let's look at this.
Let's
ranking.
look at it. Let's look. I'm going to be honest with you right up top here. I'm not feeling incredibly good about it, so I'm going to let you tell us where we should start.
This album is that bitch.
Okay, well,
This album is better than the Color Morale album. It's better than that Devil Wears Prada album. And then it starts getting pretty shaky. But I take it above anything in Just Okay, because I think it's more than a Just Okay album. It's literally slightly peak Risecore. And peak Risecore is fucking in my heart forever. This is better than that At the Skylines album.
This is near equal to that At the Skylines album.
It's not. This is the sound At the Skylines we're chasing.
So let's say we give them credit where credit is due.
It's better than that State Champs album, bare minimum, in that bitch.
Well, now you're starting to be more reasonable, which is what I was looking for, because I look at Rise Against and I'm not seeing this album clearing it.
Well, okay. Well, I was worried you weren't seeing it clear just okay.
I'm going to give you just okay, because I'm thinking back to some of these albums, especially most recently Jimmy Eat World, and I would certainly listen to this sooner than I would listen to that.
I take it over Color Morale for sure.
I think
if you're pushing back on Rise Against...
No. I think you nailed it as far as where I want it. This is what I like.
I don't know. I think that this album clears the next two.
Prada's stronger than this.
Maybe.
And I think Rise Against is honestly stronger than it too. I think we're comparing two very dramatically different styles, but I think Rise Against has more relevancy in a lot of ways than that album does.
Weirdly, but they both have the same color yellow on their album cover.
It's irrelevant, but it is weirdly true. Yes, I agree with you.
They could have been highlighter yellow, but it's not.
For what it's worth, that bitch is going to be kind of its second column as well, which is very interesting.
I don't hate this.
It feels the most right to me. I don't think I can personally go higher.
This is fine. I won't argue too hard.
Okay, so we'll move on, Marcus. We'll talk about Skinny Dipping by Stand Atlantic, their debut LP. Which dropped on October 26, 2018, featuring singles Lavender Bones and Lost My Cool. The band have made a statement in the rock world, producing an album that features themes of lost love, vulnerability, and letting go of the past.
Huh.
That just feels like someone's opinion, by the way. Like, this is not even, like, you're not even adding facts. You're just like, yeah, this is kind of how I feel about this band.
Listen, Sam, 15 plus people upvoted this description.
Does anyone use Genius?
I don't think so.
That's like an absolute bare minimum amount of people just like barely be credited as like having. I mean, I guess technically that's like the amount of critical reviews you need for like a Rotten Tomatoes movie to get like a rating, but like you'd think this had like 1,000 people at least come on here and be like, yeah, either I'm into this or I'm not.
Sure.
Like one or the other. All right, let's take a look at this track listing.
I had never heard this album.
Oh my god, I reviewed this by myself when we did it on the show.
You did.
That's
which is what I will be getting at shortly. Album I never listened to. Stand Atlantic, a band that I do adore. Just never got around to this one. Would hear the next album that came out and every album that's come out since. I'm looking forward to the one that comes out this year.
Yeah.
I remember you reviewing this album, hating it.
I fucking hate
this
album.
I never checked it out.
I might have turned a lot of people off of this. I'm not a lot of people because I'm not on a terribly popular State of the Scene show, but I am on a State of the Scene show who might like curtail someone's like enjoyment of an album. And ultimately, this was one of the worst things I heard the year it released. I was way too hard on this album.
The only thing I could think
way
of
too hard on this
was,
album.
am I misremembering?
No, you were right.
And we didn't review this on the show.
No,
and
you were right.
Like you were just venting off air to me about how much you disliked this album.
No, sir.
And the only thing I'm thinking of sitting there is like, this is really good. What the fuck was he thinking?
I have to live in embarrassment now, Marcus, because the truth is this album is a lot of fun. And I think that it hit me at the wrong time. And there are certain things about it that I think still ring true, but do not bother me nearly in the same capacity.
One of your biggest complaints I remember was that like lyrically it was too
abstract.
Poetic.
It was too abstract. And this is actually what I'll come to learn is literally
the coolest thing about it.
Yeah. And it's like literally their calling card like on every album since. They just write in a style that is like terribly difficult to decipher and almost done like intentionally silly. And at the time I didn't get any of it. And I thought it was stupid, and I couldn't piece together what this album was trying to say. And I still can't do that, but now it's one of the things that I find endearing about it, which is very funny.
Legitimately crazy.
The singles on this are absolute heat. Lavender Bones and Lost My Cool are phenomenal songs.
Some other standouts for me, I really enjoyed Cigarette Kiss. I think that was a pretty good standout. Same with Burn in the Afterthought. I like how it closes with Roses. Overall, just definitely happy with this one.
And its silly lyricism grew on me. Listening to songs like Bullfrog and Skinny Dipping are actually a lot of fun. And all of that inane writing style that I like railed against so hard back at the time we reviewed this album is like, once again, the most endearing aspect of it. I think that
the
Bonnie
abstractiveness of skinny dipping with my jeans on, I still don't feel clean or something. That was too abstract of a fucking
I
thing
truly, in any capacity, cannot piece together exactly what Bonnie is trying to say. And I've now come to love that sort of writing style from her.
Okay.
And I also think that you can really tell here on this album immediately that Bonnie is an incredibly talented vocalist and has easily been able to anchor this band through 3 albums now.
Sure. No, I agree with all that.
I guess I don't have a ton to say about it either. I just really enjoyed
Honestly,
it.
as far as debut albums go, this is pretty fucking good.
I know. So much about it is actually really clean. Like, it doesn't feel like there's nothing raw about, like, the production style is good on it. Like, the band, like, writes some catchy songs. It doesn't even feel like they're really working that hard to find a sound. It feels like they kind of almost found it immediately. Like, overall, I think it's a really good shot out of the gate. Now, I will say
it's not like a perfect album.
I don't think anything about it is, like, spectacular.
That's the catch.
It's kind of just, like, good all around.
Plus, like, the asterisk that I'm, like, surprised that it's good all around, remembering how bad your reaction was to it.
I got a spot-eyed, and I want to get your vibe on it. It's my favorite spot. It's where I put every album that I enjoy right behind Emarosa because I'm not confident enough to put it over it.
You're so fucking dumb.
I think Emarosa is my official barrier for the Just Okay. You're like, you're in the pool above it or below that album.
What's funny is I usually come in above that Emarosa album when I want to drop something.
I dropped it in there because I knew it was going to look good, and I'd have you early on this one.
I don't hate that. You're right.
Definitely enjoyed it more than the Saves the Day and Take It Back Sunday albums we listened to last week.
The thing about this album is I don't have much to say about it outside of the fact that it's good.
It's a fun romp.
Right.
And if you even wanted to try and piece it together, you wouldn't be capable or pick it apart.
We'll definitely acknowledge this band would continue to get much, much better with future releases.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that is the right spot for skinny dipping.
We'll be reviewing a St. Atlantic album on the podcast very soon, Marcos. Funny enough, we reviewed an album by the Home Team on the podcast this week, their brand new album, The Crucible of Life. And now it's fun to go back and listen to their debut, Better Off, Marcos, which released July 20th, 2018.
Was an album we'd never listened to before.
I had also not, you're right. Neither of us had checked this out before. Singles from this album, Marcos: Ageless, Fashion Forward, and She's Quiet. They also give, like, numbers on it, which is actually really fascinating that somebody actually did the work to go in here and pull Spotify numbers, which are all you gotta think completely antiquated based on, like, this was posted a year ago, so obviously it's more than all of the numbers that we're seeing here.
Right. It's so funny that some Genius pages, and I guess this applies to, like, Wikipedia pages too, clearly have so much more effort put in
like
to
this
certain
is like
areas.
A true fan, like, came and wrote this. Yeah. Marcus, I need a hot take right away. The artwork.
Have always disliked it, which is why I have never bothered to check this album out.
I can't stand it. You know what it reminds me of? It's like that Cinematic Sunrise album artwork, but this one I don't like.
Yeah, it's like a mix of all of the colors fall very flat on me.
Mm-hmm. The whole art style doesn't really work. The
font
script, it's all off. It's a complete miss from top to bottom.
And weigh this against like the new artwork for The Crucible of Life, their newest album. That also has a elephant head on it. That's a good album art. It's because of better font, better like placement of things, framing, all that. Mm-hmm. Just looks better. Bad art can definitely keep you away from checking an album. That's what took place here. And I slightly regret it because this is a good album. Good. This is a Home Team before the discovery of Sauce.
It is so fucking funny listening to this band just make sort of what is relatively a straight ahead pop punk album. Like, this sounds like every other band that was kind of like doing this shit at the time. Like, oh, here's a Real Friends knuckle puck ass album. Like, hey, we sped up the tempo on this one. And it's like, if you listen closely enough, like if you really listen closely enough, you can hear the future of the Home Team in there somewhere.
Right. There are moments where you hear things that they would explore for a full song.
Fashion Forward kicks in, and it's like, oh, this is sort of the Home Team.
Right.
So much of this album, funnily enough, and I don't know how many people are going to get this poll, sounds like Sycamore to me. It has this pop punk with flair, which Sycamore was incredibly goated at doing.
It has a little bit of Panic at the Disco for me.
Yeah, it's precisely those style of bands.
It's the with flair,
yes.
So like it's fine and it's good, but it's certainly not the best iteration of this band.
I think it is like what this is this is good bones. This is strong foundation. Like you can build on this. Like you can't
hear the
run
home
it
team
back.
in this.
There's not enough interesting here to
Yeah.
like do that. I don't even know if songs on this album make the like set list anymore. Like with this new
She's
album,
Quiet.
I'm thinking everything's getting cut.
She's Quiet might be closest. That is the one song off this I had
Maybe
heard.
on a headliner, maybe.
This is the one song I had heard previously because I think it had been in their top 5 on Spotify for a very long time, and it would just like play after I listened to something off of like Slow Bloom when that album released.
I'm looking at this track listing, and I don't know that anything in particular really had the strength to truly stand out for me. I think it is like a terribly strong mix of just like vibes, but nothing has like, God, this band is so well known for like having an insane line or just an incredible hook, and it's truly miraculous that they somehow managed to not find those things on this record.
Yeah. Production's also definitely a little tough. It's not
Probably in
aged
line
very
with
well,
the style they were going for, right?
and it's fair. But then you pull up the tier list,
Yeah, but you pull up the tier list, and I don't think it's going to be
and
incredibly
this
generous. I'm
this
going to be
ain't-
honest with
this
you.
ain't clearing skinny dipping.
No, it's crazy to see how much ahead of themselves Stand Atlantic are in their debut than the home team even comes close to finding themselves.
I probably take this maybe right after that Suicide Silence album.
Oh, you're going all the way down in the pretty mid. Interesting.
I don't know. Pretty mid is like I think the further down you drop, the more disrespectful it gets. But like
in terms of
again,
like the naming conventions of our tiers.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
But I think that's being honest. Like, this is not like a bad album, but it is just kind of a pretty mid one.
and if I'm looking at like the other albums and pretty
You opened
mid,
a lot hotter, though. I feel like you said this was pretty good before we started having a conversation. You really
Right.
threw me there.
pretty good essentially translates to pretty mid.
Right. You have to like course correct your language when
Yeah.
discussing the album.
I think I would sooner go back and listen to A Feel by Sleeping with Sirens.
You're right. I would too, because this doesn't quite have
There's
a
more
banger.
going on that Suicide Silence album.
I'm actually giving.
But then the further down you go in that tier list, like the worse some of the songs on those albums get. And I think this is more enjoyable than that
I know where I would put
Slaughter
this.
album.
I would put this right over Mom Jeans. This is the closest to Mom Jeans I think we've gotten since Mom Jeans, where it's like, this is totally fine. Like, there's no like standout song, but there's also
Right.
no song that's like outright terrible. It's just all right.
Right. It's not like
Doesn't make me angry, and it doesn't make me super excited, you know? Like, you look at the albums that like drop into fucking awful, and like those albums upset me in some capacity.
and it also doesn't have like I think the issue with this album is it doesn't have like really 3 big songs in the way that like that Amir album does, maybe Panic. I think it's probably more consistent than those other records that are before it, but since it doesn't have bigger, better songs.
Yeah, there's no LA devotee on
No.
fucking that home team album. Granted, you know, I look at that Fall Out Boy album, that My Chem album, and think, man, they really are
I
hurt
get
by
it.
the pedigree of
I get
their
it.
other records. I think is their biggest problem. And the home team hasn't quite released the Black Parade or fucking Infinity on High yet. But I think if that was the case, this might do slightly worse. It's just so incredibly fine.
Well, I think you also have to factor in when it was released. Like if this is the next album after The Crucible of Life,
Oh, that's an incredibly good
This
point.
ranks
Again, it's
low.
the pedigree. It's the
Yeah.
pedigree. It's incredibly the pedigree. You're right. And it's where it lands in the hierarchy of their records. Marcos, at the end of this ranking the scene, we still sit with Sempiternal by Bring the Horizon at the very top and Father of All by Green Day at the very bottom. Once again, patreon.com/SOTS podcast. If you want to suggest an album for ranking the scene, we'll be back again next week. Goodbye.
good play.